But that's great. So another question that came through are, what are some common misconceptions about the relationship between science and faith in the context of healing? And I recommend those.
Yes, yes, yes. Okay, so I love tackling this in my book because what seems to often be totally dichotomous in nature, whether it's right brain, left brain, science and faith, and any number of things, right? We can actually, if we really look at it, they go better together than separate, peanut butter and jelly, right? And so I love talking about this because I feel like I'm a scientist at heart. I did bioengineering background. I love using my analytical left brain mind, and I love to prove when I'm doing testing or whatever, the science is really, really important to me. But at the same time, I can also hold in my hand the idea that things that are outside our visible realm of science, the unexpected, the miracles, the healing that we don't see coming and we don't expect, is also true. And we know from physics and quantum physics, especially, that the power of energy, the power of hope, the power of love, the power of faith and belief in something else is possible. There is actually data now to support that those things that we might think of principles that are more faith-based actually have very pure and true validity in our healing. And what I found in my journey is I was like all left brain analytical in the beginning. And then I've always had a strong faith, but it's really swung to equally using them. And what happens, especially as women, and not maybe all of you are women, but I see a lot of women on the call, sometimes we as women, I think, have a deeper intuition. And because we're in a very masculine driven world, whether we're healers, practitioners, doctors, we kind of get told that it's not reliable to trust that intuition. And what I've learned in my own healing journey and in my patients is, number one, our bodies give us signals every day. And so often we diminish that. We like live for, I always say I lived from the neck up and always trusted my brain, but not my heart. But my body was telling me even before the breast cancer, hey, you're pushing too hard. You're working too hard. You're not resting enough. You're taking on too much. But I ignored it. I suppressed it. And then I got breast cancer. Now, was that the cause? Probably not entirely, but it was one piece of the puzzle. So when I started to heal, one of the things I did was start listening to the signals that my body was giving me, like, is there chest pressure, like feeling anxious? Is there an upset stomach? Is there a pain somewhere that's giving you a signal? Let me tell you a perfect recent example. I have a broken arm and I just had surgery last week. And I was going along in the beginning of this year, really deliberately thinking last year was too much. I traveled, I signed books, I did a movie. It was a lot and it was amazing. But I realized in my body it was way too much. I was exhausted and a little overwhelmed by the end of the year. So this year in the beginning, I prayed and meditated on how do I slow down? How do I say no to more things? I think we can all use this message. And I was very deliberate at what I committed to. I had only 2 events from January through June that I committed to in February. And I'm going along. My story is I was roller skating to take out the garbage, and it's true. And I fell and I broke my arm. And the moment I looked down and saw my weird shaped wrist, I knew, number one, it's broken. And number two, the divine was like giving me a very clear signal. You're not slowing down quick enough, which is kind of funny, right? That it had to, but I literally knew in that moment, this is way bigger than a fractured arm. It is to stop me in my tracks for me to evaluate. And to me, it was almost a blessing, although it was painful. The physical body was in pain. The physical body was like, this sucks. This is so hard to type with one hand. This slows me way down. And guess what? The only 2 events I had all this spring, I had to cancel and tell them and disappoint people. So I had to practice this intuitive sense of like taking care of myself first. And 2 things that I would have loved to attend, I had to tell them, I am so sorry. I have surgery. I can't go. And so it was practicing. It was because of this arm break. And you could call this arm just not a coincidental thing, right? I know it was a much deeper spiritual meaning because it really allowed me to, number one, say no to even more and practice that thing, which is hard for all of us as women sometimes. And then and in the same token, just realize I really, really need to take care of myself first. And again, this is a lesson for all of us, men and women, and so relevant. And I'm saying that because I think that demonstrates all of those feelings of the deeper meaning of my fracture had nothing to do with science. It was purely an intuitive, spiritual, emotional lesson. But learning that lesson, even in this fracture, even in the suffering, I have had such joy in the last 2 weeks. Like I'm suffering physically. It's painful to go through surgery. But in my heart, I have this deep joy, a sense of purpose and meaning, and that there's something greater than myself looking out for me and guiding me and correcting me. And in that sense, that's how I meld that. And what I've learned to do in clinical practice is sit with a patient and maybe ask questions that come from the heart space versus just the analytical space.
Mhm.